Sometimes I think the Overwatch scene is beyond saving. Players have done countless stupid things, but the organizations they play for may be even worse. From a successful team that was ruined after being sold to the Chinese government, to a team with a suspicious amount of sexual assault allegations, to a team that never won a match in over 40 tries, Overwatch teams are just as cooked as the game's professional players. The first team today was once a bastion of Overwatch esports, one of the best and most transparent organizations in the league, for better or for worse. The LA Valiant started in the Overwatch League with a lot of promise. They had two players from the best European contenders team, Rogue, in Unko and Soon, promising tank players like Finzi and Envy, and already proven players like Karq and Agilities. They started off the season going 7-3 in Stage 1, which was the 4th best record, but things started to take a turn for the worse after a meta change made their large roster look completely useless, as the coaches didn't know how to properly utilize their players. Things turned around once again though, after the team traded Unko for Custa, who was notable for being my personal friend, in April. After that, the Valiant were able to correct course, finishing Stage 3 with a 7-3 record, and even winning the final stage of the Overwatch League's inaugural season, finishing 2nd place overall and taking home 200,000 bones. All this transparency had its downsides though. Valiant were respected for giving inside looks into what it was like being a pro player in this new franchise environment, and a lot of these videos still hold up today. There is one video that never held up and never should have been released to the public though. Noah Winston, the CEO of Immortals, Valiant's then parent company, had a meeting with a player about his performance. The chosen location, In-N-Out Burger. This video is incredibly awkward, but here it is.
So you understand that you're going to have a shot at the main roster again.
Yeah.
But to be transparent with you, like, this is the shot.
In and of itself, this video isn't that bad. But Agilities in this video is 18 years old. He just moved to an entirely new country. His new coach is calling him trash every day and won't let him play with the best players on the team. And instead of getting him one-on-one coaching, they subject him to a public humiliation ritual at a fast food chain. This becomes even crazier when you see that they had a full-time sports psychologist on their staff at this time. What were they thinking? They also showed that they were literally segregating their players. Some played for a sister team, where they weren't allowed to scrim with the players on the main roster no matter what, and were told that they had no possible chance of competing on stage. They didn't even let the players on the sister team live with the players on the main roster. Needless to say, this video had a very negative reaction because this is just crazy. What is the point of even having a team of pro players if you don't let them professionally play together? Well, the upside of this transparency is that we know why the team was run so poorly. Coach Moon, their coach in the first 2 seasons, was genuinely a terrorist. He made a plethora of baffling roster moves. In the first season, the team had 16 players on his team. 16! Because this guy couldn't figure it out. They had 5 DPS players on the roster throughout the season, but at one point, he played their flex support on Widowmaker for no reason, and he was the only flex support they had. The craziest roster move he ever made came in the 2nd season of the league though, as in the first game of the season, the team's main support wasn't playing. Instead, the main tank was playing support. Moon's reason?
처음에 비자 이슈로 인해서 저희가 좀 시간이 많이 부족한 상황이었어요. 연습 시간이 다른 팀들에 비해서. 그런 상황에서 연습을 하고 있었는데 커스타가 하는 플레이가 굉장히 우리가 고츠 메타에 대한 이해도가 굉장히 높아졌을 때에 하면은 되게 좋은 플레이들을 하고 있었고 나머지 팀원들 5명은 아직 고츠 메타에 대한 이해도가 부족하다 보니까 그런 커스타의 플레이를 받쳐주지 못하는.
He benched Custa for being too smart. Not only was Custa the team's best option for support, but he was also their most popular player, causing an uproar on Twitter. Unfortunately, much like James Harden, Coach Moon didn't have internet and continued to play kooky on main support, causing the team to go 0-7 in Stage 1. The Valiant were never able to really find their footing after that, and the season was more or less a complete wash. The 2020 Valiant were at least the most fun team they had to date. This is not at all foreshadowing, but Immortals were clearly looking to downsize their esports division at the time. So the team aimed to just save money, releasing their players who might actually want to get paid, and scouting a team of young and hungry players. Luckily for them, they assembled a fantastic team. And without Adolf Moon coaching them, they went on to outperform their expected result. They started with their leader, tommathan, who was a family man who also just had a keen eye for Overwatch talent. They also had Gig on tank, who looks like a male model, but the best player on the team, Lastro, was involved in a scandal. 2020 was the first year where match chat would be turned on in official matches, as they were now being played online. The players didn't really know about that, so in one of the first matches of the season, to test what they could say in the chat, Lastro typed, "Sex, big dick," which truly came as a shock to the observers and commentators of the match. Lastro was forced to give an apology and was fined $1,000. This team was also how players like KSB or Kai, Shax, and former professional Minecraft player KSF were able to get recognized as well. Can we get an go? They finished 8th, which in a normal season would have granted them a playoff spot. But there was something going on that year that stopped from being normal. I just don't remember what it was. Maybe if McGravy wasn't so busy flirting with pop stars on Twitter, they would have had a better record. If you want Halsey to flirt with you on Twitter, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and consider clicking the join button. Anyways, it was clear to everyone that this was a team that could grow, and all the Valiant had to do was re-sign them, shift a few people around, and watch the results improve. They signed a new tank and Adam to help boost their roster. Now, if they lost out on some players, they were looking good headed into the new season. Until January 9th, 2021, when they suddenly announced that all their players were dropped. This was a complete rug pull from Rain, Dreamer, Adam, Agilities, Hunter, and Sungwoo, many of whom weren't able to find another job in the league after this. So, what happened? Immediately afterwards, there was a lot of misinformation being spread around, and given what my hook is for the section of this video, I'm no better. Basically, Immortals signed an agreement with Link on Esports, or LGE, which was supposed to last for a year. They didn't relinquish any of their ownership rights, but the Overwatch League suggested that they move to China, and the suggestion became not a suggestion at some point, so Immortals handed the management rights to the team over to LGE. Valiant said they dropped the team due to visa issues, Reddit journalists said Xi Jinping bought them, there was a lot of misinformation. LGE also owned the Chengdu Hunters, which I'm sure was not a conflict of interests, as under LGE, the Valiant sucked. Like, really bad. Their team in 2021 was made of all Chinese players. When the best player on your roster is Waya, you know there's a problem. Mon Lanran sucked. Silver 3 may have actually been a Silver 3 player. And they had Crystal on the team. Don't even get me started about Crystal. Needless to say, they did not win a single game in 2021. 2022 was somehow even worse. I'm going to be using this Reddit post from Ezra, and it's a translation of an interview of Nohill and Haruhi, who coached the team. Their roster seemed to be much better this year, as they had players like Lengsa, Sawson, and Marvel, who people had actually heard of. But their roster could have even been better. Before the season, they were aggressively pursuing Eileen of the Guangzhou Charge to join their roster. They wanted to meet him in person for an interview and have him meet the players to see if they would all get along. Eileen was ready to go over there, and he expected, as is customary, for his plane ticket to be covered by the Valiant. They said no, and missed out on one of the best Chinese players ever. The plane ticket cost $70. This is only the tip of the iceberg of how cheap this LA Valiant team was. During matches, players were expected to have a banner of the team they played for hanging behind them. The players paid for those out of pocket. But with what money? The players were consistently paid late, sometimes even up to 4 months late. This became so bad that they had to get travel subsidies from Blizzard just to take the metro to their practice facility. At one point, they were worried that they would have to start losing matches on purpose because they made it to the playoffs, they couldn't afford to go. The delays in payment were so long that the players received their tax forms and were expected to pay them before they had received the paychecks they were being taxed for. At one point, the Valiant had a sponsor for $200,000. When Nohill met with them to receive their money and hear the conditions for the contract, they heard that LGE had already been there, taken the money, and when asked about it, refused to answer, going as far as to ghost Nohill and players for weeks at a time. Eventually, all the contracts were paid out, but unsurprisingly, not a single player from the 2022 roster returned for 2023. LGE's parent company went bankrupt shortly after the season, leading to the dissolution of the Chengdu Hunters and the transfer of managerial rights back to Immortals. Immortals by this point were also penny pinching, as it was clear that it was literally impossible to make a return on investment from the Overwatch League, as Immortals paid $20 million for their slot, and God knows how much for yearly upkeep. For all that, only one team made a profit, and it was probably by the hair of their chin. As such, they brought on a skeleton crew of NA players who continued the trend of being ass, but at least one of them was Canadian, which is interesting, I guess. They were able to win 2 games though, which is 2 games better than the Vegas Eternal, but that's a story for another day. LA Valiant are truly one of a kind, as they had high moments in every season but one, and yet many still look at them as just a failure. Their socials were inactive, and even at one point, one of the players tried to get to the Twitter account in 2023. But no one was around by that point to change the password and tell him what it was. This was more like a contenders team made of friends than a $20 million professional team. This was just embarrassing. They ended up as a complete husk of what they once were. The team that once had many fans, interesting content pieces, and a great social game was left empty, with no one left caring except for maybe Seeker's mom, and she probably didn't even care by the end. The Valiant will never return, and good riddance. But this will probably always be my favorite esports story.
Hey guys, today we're making an omelet in a cup.
Excellent.
The next team on the list is undoubtedly the worst team in Overwatch League history. The Shanghai Dragons were amongst the first 12 Overwatch League teams during the league's debut in 2018, and were the only team without a South Korean player on their roster. Owned by NetEase, Blizzard's game distributor in China, it was a point of pride for them to have a roster of all Chinese players. Now we know that China is a fantastic country for Overwatch, but back in 2017 and 18, things were a lot different. Most Western fans couldn't even name a single Chinese player, and players on the 2017 World Cup team were literally unknown. Future legend Gujue commented that this lagging behind was because the regions played the game differently, with the Chinese style being slower and more strategic. They were also a bit slower to adopt new heroes, leading to the meta being different, which stopped there from being a lot of crossover between the Chinese scene and other scenes. So when the Shanghai Dragons released their roster, it was expected that a few of the players would be unknown, but when their roster was announced, most of their players were unknown. Their main tank, Roshan, had previously played for one team, whose best result was 5th through 8th. Their DPS player's previous team finished last place in contenders, and their other DPS was too busy impregnating several women at once to practice. That is not a joke. Undead was a known cheater who abandoned his kid to play in the Overwatch League, got a new girlfriend, kept cheating on her, and tried to keep it a secret. When this came out, he was swiftly dropped from the team. The worst part? He was their best player. There was one team in the Chinese scene who they skipped out on signing named Miraculous Youngster. They were having close matches with Korean contenders teams and were a legitimate threat to play against. They were the first Chinese team that people really had to worry about. Let me read you some of their players and tell me if you recognize them. Sky, Late Young, Chichiran, Yang Xiaolong, and Overwatch League MVP, Lee. They didn't sign a single one of these guys until the Shanghai Dragons went 0-10 in the first stage, and they weren't even close to winning. They won 6 maps in stage 1. How? They knew they had to do something, and they signed 5 new players in Geggery, Otto, the aforementioned Sky, the main character Fearless, and Damon. Only one of these guys was Chinese, and he played for Miraculous Youngster. Why would you take a gamble on altering when you have one of the few proven Chinese talents in Sky looking for a job? Just interesting to me. These new players were hopeful and clearly had a lot of potential. There are not a lot of interviews with the 2018 Shanghai Dragons, as interviews were only given to the winners usually, but this is what the new players had to say about their team.
저희라면 바꿀 수 있지 않을까. 저희라면 가능할 수 있을 것 같아서 저는 좀 10판 이상 이기는 걸로 제 목표를 삼겠습니다.
상하이 드래곤즈의 목표는 언제나 같습니다. 제가 들어오기 전에도 제가 상하이 드래곤즈를 응원하면서 생각했던 것과 무조건 첫 승입니다.
After these signings, they put themselves on 10-win pace, just like Fearless said, by winning 2 maps in Stage 2, up to 9 maps in Stage 3, and things were looking worse, until one fateful day, on June 7th. The 2 worst teams in the league played each other. This was the Dragons' time to break the curse. They lost the first map, but struck back with 2 decisive map wins in a row. The Mayhem were on the ropes. Finally, a taste of victory.
Awesome guys removed by that pulse bomb, but Zemicide brings it back. Dig is down to Logic C, 97%. We're getting close. Shanghai has to make the difference here, but it seems it's going to be a little bit too much. A pipe dream, perhaps. There it is, overtime. Fearless has to throw himself for the point, but the Florida Mayhem stand tall against the odds. And the Shanghai Dragons, beloved Dragons, today is not your day, but when it is, it will be sweet. It's the Mayhem today to take away the win, right at the death of things, pushed all the way by Shanghai.
They lost the next 2 maps. Half their map wins for the stage came from this match. Well, back to the drawing board. New plan. Fire all the old trash players. Oh wait, actually most of them are just quitting because of burnout and pressure to win a game and the intense depression that comes with not being able to succeed at something despite how much effort you put into it. I mean, that makes it easier, so I guess it's fine. But this time we're gonna do something crazy. Sign players who people actually know who played for good teams. And that's what they did. They brought on new talent like Gamsu, Ding, karq's other half DM, and Izayaki, finally. And the next season, they were poised to win. Their first match was against their new Chinese rival, the Hangzhou Spark, which featured most of the Chinese players they could have and should have signed. This was not close. Then they played the stacked Vancouver Titans, and that was also not close. Then, finally, they played the floundering Boston Uprising. This was it. A chance not only for a win, but for their tank to get his revenge on his former team.
This could be it, the second ticks, getting ready to come through. kelly's gonna be eliminated. Princeton's is out from Aim God, but it's gonna expire. They will be able to finish him up. There you go. They're gonna get it. Just a couple more percent to go. Let them have it, Boston. Axiom, top of the primal rage, but it does not matter. Ladies and gentlemen, history has been made. The Shanghai Dragons, on the 43rd attempt out, managed to pick up their first match victory.
Never thought, the fans never thought they'd see this day. It took 43 matches in Gamsu defeating his old team tonight.
They couldn't even fight back. The Dragons had won. 0-42, the longest loss streak in history. But it was all worth it for that beautiful moment. The Dragons went on to be great, winning a championship, having players win MVP, discovering the future GOAT. But that moment of pure emotion, that was as good as it ever got. That was their moment.
Fans out there, fans in tears. They finally did it.
I'll just let the fans take us out to the break. Enjoy it.
The last team in today's video had so many sexual assault allegations against them that fans began to believe that they were hiding something deeper. That has a lot to do with the Boston Uprising's owner, Robert Kraft. Kraft is an insanely rich man with a net worth of $11.1 billion and full ownership over the New England Patriots. In 2018, a detective was investigating a supposed sex ring that was operating out of a strip mall involving a massage parlor. During the investigation, they found that Robert Kraft was a client who had been there multiple times. He paid $45 for little action because he was tight on cash and needed the early bird discount. That is not a joke. He was later charged with soliciting a prostitute, which he denied because he said he felt a real connection with the girls. Before I start talking about the team, I want to say that most of what I'm about to say about these players are allegations. I have no idea if they're true or not because I wasn't there. I'm going to present them in a neutral way because I don't know what happened and I barely feel comfortable talking about this stuff. all that neutrality would come after the first person who was accused, Dreamcasper, because he did that shit. The Boston Uprising were a team on the rise. They signed a lot of relatively unknown players for cheap, hoping to use a moneyball strategy to win. And to everyone's surprise, they were winning. And a lot of the success had to do with Dreamcasper. He was actually really good back in the day. After solidifying himself as a top player, a girl released her story with Dreamcasper, saying that he'd acted inappropriately with her and a lot of other gross things that I don't want to talk about. The situation happened when Casper was 21. She was 14 years old. He admitted to it, and he was dropped within hours of the story coming out. He tried to make a return in 2020, but come on, man. He garnered the name Teen Grasper for this incident, and look who commented to defend his boy. Like a moth to a flame. You should watch my last video if you want context of that situation because it is equally crazy. This incident cast a very dark shadow over the league and influenced how people thought of pro players very heavily in the coming years. In 2020, guess what? It happened again. Off-tank player Tommathan was accused of being weird and touchy with the girl at BlizzCon. Tommathan denied these allegations, saying he didn't do anything violent and was just a quote, complete simp. His Twitter has now been deleted, so I can't see his tweet longer anymore, but this article survives. Tommathan would later play with Dark Mode Esports, where Dreamcasper allegedly played as well, making them potentially worse than the Boston Uprising. Fans asked if they should just rebrand to the Boston Predators. At that point, I think it would have been for the best because guess what? It happened again. Lastly, in 2020, Boston Uprising brought on main tank player Mikey. He would later leave for the San Francisco Shock, where he was accused of being weird with women and had several victims listed. He responded with an apology, and he wasn't even dropped from the team after this incident. It's okay though, because he was banned from his team after the Overwatch League for spamming the N-word on Discord. On a lighter note, during this time period, the Boston Uprising also had another main tank player, being on the team from 2018 to 2020. He was always reliable on tank and was a good enough player during his time. In late 2020 though, he went inactive and no one knew why. He stopped scrimming with the team, and after his contract expired, he was released without a word. He wasn't the most popular player, so people didn't notice what he was doing for a while after he left. But it was discovered that Mr. Handsome was working for a modeling agency in Korea called K+. He was also on a Japanese reality dating TV show called Heart Signal, where he hopefully met the love of his life. Though unfortunately, Axiom did not win. I wonder if he introduced himself as a pro gamer or a model first. The Uprising would eventually collapse just like every other team. They kept trying to save money despite having the richest owner of them all, and weren't able to put together a really great team until the last season, when unfortunately most of the players they signed were washed, or couldn't get along. I mean, they had Lee Jae-gon, Decay, and Striker. How did they ever think these guys could work together on a team?
I should be shooting them when they come out of the choke, but Striker thinks I should mark the echo ghost when I have Mercy Pocket, parentheses. He was dying to Yaki. Oh god. Then gets in my face.
Were they a sex trafficking ring? I mean, it's just weird that it happened 3 times. That's all I'm gonna say. If you like this video, please like and subscribe.